We have more breaking news. This is on a second topic. Hamas just responded to the proposed peace plan that the president and Israeli prime minister put forward earlier this week. Some of the terms, including the release of all of the hostages, have been agreed to. Let's bring in Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan to help us here. Margaret, what do we know, and have they accepted some part or all of what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have cooked up?
Well, John, what I know after making calls to Qatari and senior U.S. officials is that this response is being viewed as very positive. Now, U.S. officials also know they need to proceed with some caution in hammering out some details that were frankly left out of that 20-point plan that the White House published earlier in the week. Those talks could begin as soon as next week to try to work out some of these details. But the White House is viewing this as positive enough that, in fact, the White House spokesperson just tweeted out a photo of the President of the United States recording a response to Hamas's acceptance. The White House also published the written response that Hamas has released. Now, I do have that statement in front of me, and among the things that Hamas said they would do is to hand over the administration of Gaza to a Palestinian body of independence based on the support of Arab and Islamic parties. The White House plan is for President Trump to actually run the board of peace and do so to help oversee this plan. We know that the statement from Hamas does leave a little bit of wiggle room, particularly on the specifics of how they would decommission weapons. But this really stipulates for those families who have been waiting for the past 2 years for the return of their loved ones. This may give them a real sign of hope, and perhaps the first test we could see of whether this is a full acceptance would be if we do indeed see the handover of the hostages within the next 72 hours. I referenced that specific time frame because that is a point in this plan, that within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting the agreement, all hostages would be returned. We have not yet heard from the Israeli prime minister. The president of the United States making clear he views this as an acceptance, may in fact be boxing in the Israeli prime minister to accept this. But the long and short of it, John, is that the details here, 20 living hostages who are estimated to be still in Gaza are expected to be handed over, along with the remains of those who passed away. These would be alongside Israel having to release 250 life-sentenced prisoners, plus 1,700 Gazans, including women and children, that they have been detaining. That's part of this plan. And really, John, the moment and the timing here is so key. We are nearly to the day, 2 years from that horrific attack that had Hamas and associated terror groups carry out a surprise attack on Israel that killed 1,200 people, that took 250 people hostage, and then launched into a bloody war that has estimated to have killed 65,000 people, triggered a famine due to the blockade Israel had of the Strip, and really upended the entire region and the politics there. So this is really a significant announcement, particularly if it proceeds as laid out here.
And Margaret, let me just catch up with you there. So on a couple of things. One, so it sounds like you're saying Hamas is okay with the kind of new governing organization. One of the conditions, as I recall, from this 20-point plan is that Hamas would have no role whatsoever in Gaza governance. And then there was that other point, which is the key point about demilitarization, which is to say giving up all of their weapons. That's still an unknown at the moment. Is that right?
The specifics of the handing over of the weapons is something that will have to. I mean, clearly it's complicated. You have to carry that out. But that is short of the complete and total destruction of Hamas that, remember, was the Israeli prime minister's position. Handing over weapons, decommissioning and transferring power is just short of that. We know from the statement the White House released in terms of their translation of the Hamas statement, it says there, and you put your finger on it, John, that Hamas would be included in a comprehensive Palestinian national framework. That's different language than what was in the White House proposal. So again, there are details here, and the devil's always in those details. And those negotiations to try to work out implementation could begin, I'm told, as soon as next week. But again, we have not yet heard from the Israeli prime minister. One of the things stipulated here is that as soon as Israel also accepts here that it would have the war immediately end. And we know that there is an ongoing Israeli assault of Gaza underway. So we have to really watch what's happening on the ground.
Margaret Brennan with the important developments and the key caveats. Thank you, Margaret, for covering the territory there for us comprehensively. Our coverage of both of these stories will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm John Dickerson.